Our planet. This is our system, our living system. And this is our time. When future generations look back upon us, how do you want them to perceive us? Let's take a look at our history and try to see how the information unfolds and how it can help us answer that question. Our planet's history, let's start right from the beginning, started about 4.6 billion years ago. Now, the early phase of our planet's history was not very amenable to life, that Hadean period. But after about 400 million years, something incredible happened on the planet. The first oceans appeared. And these oceans were not exactly like the oceans we have today. The chemistry was a little bit different. There was a lot of iron in it. But they enabled molecules to move around. It gave them a freedom to explore, to discover, to connect, to react. And because that happened, in another 400 million years, took a while, 3.8 billion years ago, we have evidence of the first life on our planet. Now, these archaea and these bacteria were probably analogous to the first nomads on the planet. It must have been tough. There was a lot of trial and error, a lot of accidents. But as they came together, they evolved, and they formed a new form of cyanobacteria. These are the most successful species on our planet and have been around among the longest. Cyanobacteria are responsible for regulating our planet to a point where we could exist. We should actually all bow down to them. The other thing cyanobacteria did is that they were able to take nitrogen from the atmosphere, fix it into fertilizer in order to fertilize their communities. They were the first agriculturalists. Now, it took a little bit longer for a few more milestones, but more than a billion years after that, life happened on something incredible. It happened on the division of labor. And this is when individual cells came together and figured out that their efficiency could go up if they split the tasks in survival. When the efficiency of life on the planet increased, then the number of species grew exponentially. This is our biogeochemical clock. This is the most important piece of information we have to piece together the meaning of our existence, the conditions with which we exist in, and the things that we have to be weary of. You'll notice, because we're a little egocentric, that there's a species missing from that figure. And we'll add it just to humor ourselves. So humans, we're not on that figure for a reason. We haven't been around long enough. We've only been around for about 200,000 years. We are not, by any means, a successful species. So let's understand ourselves as a new species. And to do that, let's try to investigate other models. Let's focus on early species on the planet. What was their history like? What did they have to endure? What can we learn from it? We'll take a look at the Archaea and our first bacterial ancestors. There was a time where they would have had a lot of trial and error. And then when they got it right, the populations would have soared successfully. Now, these ancestors of ours, these Archaea bacteria, would have utilized the resources from their environment like every living system does. And just like every living system, they had a waste product. Their waste product was oxygen. Remember, there was no oxygen on the planet when they evolved. So it was actually a poison to them. Now, they were lucky because as they made the oxygen, the Earth could attenuate it. There was so much iron in those early oceans that it could grab their waste and bury it for them. Until they got to a point where they were so successful that they outpaced the planet. They produced oxygen faster then the planet could dissolve more iron to attenuate it, and it wasn't so pretty. After their populations dropped, the planet had a time to recover. And eventually, the oxygen concentrations that were toxic to these organisms dropped as well. And of course, the populations could again prosper. Unfortunately for them, they didn't have a large collective consciousness, and they just repeated the same mistakes. And then they suffered times of prosperity, times of devastation. They left clues for us in the past. These banded iron deposits you see, those lines in there, those different strata, represent their history, and they left it for us to learn from. The red lines you see there are their times of prosperity, where there was enough iron in the ocean to grab that oxygen and it would settle into strata. And the times that you see the alternating white areas would have been analogous to their times of devastation. Now let's take a look at another new species, us. We started off as nomads, agriculturalists. We discovered the division of labor, and then we took off. Boy, did we get efficient. And just like every species, we utilize the resources in our environment, and we also create a waste product. One of our waste products is carbon dioxide. Now, we took about 200,000 years to get here, and the concentration of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere was about 280 parts per million. And then, of course, we have started to prosper and outpace the speed at which the planet can attenuate our waste products, and so we're affecting our environment. And you've all heard that the CO2 in the environment has gone up to 400 parts per million. It's been unprecedented since the time of our existence, okay? But it's not just carbon dioxide. It's everything that grows that's proportional to our populations. So that would include fertilizer use and fertilizer introduction into the environment, pesticide use, other chemicals, anything we produce that's a waste product, bad television programs. Any of that is proportional to our population growth. So every system that we affect is going to also accumulate in our environment, and it might be a detriment. So we have a choice. Our choice is, are we going to let nature take its course and do what every other species on this planet has done before us? It will not be a pretty history if we do. And I personally would not want to be part of that. What we can do, however, is learn from the past and do something that no species has ever done before. Be sustainable. Wow. We actually have enough information and enough potential to do that for the first time in living history and in the existence of this planet. But what are these sustainable levels? Well, the UN has set values. They used to set a value of 9.2 billion, but we're not going to make that. We're way past that now. So they've set population values to about 10 billion. Okay, we're at 7.4 now. Unfortunately for us, we're going to reach that 10 billion by 2100. And also unfortunately for us, we do not have the controlling or governing infrastructure to do that steadily and to maintain those numbers yet. That means that our control is sloppy, and we have the potential to have this kind of history oscillating around that number. We will eventually stay at that number because that's the planet's carrying capacity. But the way we get there or the way we maintain it is important. If we're smart, we can do it stably with as little oscillation as possible. Now, how do we get there intelligently? Well, the first thing is it's not just population. It's CO2 levels, it's PFC levels in the atmosphere, it's PCB levels in our water. It's the usage of water. Everything we do has a sustainable level And we can figure that out. We know, we have pretty good estimates of what those are. So we can try to figure out a way to maintain control. So of course we're not going to be flatlined. We have room for a little bit of buffering and a little oscillating. But we have to also know what that room is. So for population, for example, we might be able to afford a 1 billion oscillation. Ideally, the smaller your oscillation, the better it is. Another important thing is the response factor. Everything that we need to manage, because it is part of our environment and the things that systems we're influencing, has its own response time. Population, a few generations. CO2, 300 to 500 years. PCBs, 1,000 to 2,000 years. PFCs, longer. All of these things need to be known so that we know how stringent we need to be in controlling them. Of course, this needs global consensus. We cannot expect lawmakers who are voted in on 5-year terms to have any influence on this, because that's not the rules of the game and that's not the design of the system. These people who are voted in for short terms need to act on immediate needs of their electorate. This needs global consensus, and this needs global levels that are going to be announced and accepted, and global goals that we all work towards. Okay. Now, sustainability has been coined in the last few decades and defined very clearly by the UN as our ability to live and to prosper in our environments, but to leave it to our ancestors or to our future children in a way that was just as good or even better than the way we found it, but not to leave our children in a situation that is worse than what we inherited from our ancestors. There's not just top-down control, there's bottom-up control. And there's only one peaceful way to accomplish this globally, and that's literacy. So educating students worldwide so that everybody can read and write and at least have access to information. And we can do that now better than we ever could have in the past. Again, that needs global consensus. What I hope is that this information that's sent to students everywhere includes these very critical pieces and thought processes. I would hope that every grade school classroom around the world has our biogeochemical clock on it, next to the world map, because it is sobering to understand how small we are in time and how carefully we need to tread. I would also expect that every student be introduced to the concept of sustainability, and only then can we expect them to make wise decisions. Scientists work very, very hard to piece this information together, and yet less than 2% of the population is even privy to it, and that's not acceptable. This information has to be available to every citizen. If students are introduced to the concepts of sustainability, and they can read and write and access information, then maybe they make a conscious decision to have 2 children. They make a conscious decision about how much water to use. They make a conscious decision about how much wealth is enough. It applies universally to everything. Rachel Carson had said that mankind is now faced with the greatest challenge ever, and that is not to prove our mastery over our environment anymore. Our greatest challenge is to prove our mastery over ourselves. Now, we have 3 advantages over our bacterial ancestors. We have the clues they left behind for us. We have an evolved collective conscious. We can do better. And we have a choice. So when future generations look back upon us, would you like them to remember us as a time of enlightenment Or would you like them to remember us as a time of detriment? We have a choice. Thank you.